him an expert in the field of mining. 11 years ago, when Beranger was 18, an old-time prospector, in for a drink at some broken-down saloon, found him mopping floors to make enough money to eat. The grizzled fellow took him under his wing and taught him everything he needed to know to strike it rich. And Beranger had. Where to look, and then how to coax gold and silver out of the earth. How to read a man's eyes to see if he was bluffing at poker. By the time his mentor died, Beranger had a bank account bursting in a way that most men only dreamed about. Finished with mining, he'd packed up his tools and moved to town. But his reputation had spread. He was sought out for advice. Soon others were throwing money his way just for instruction, saying he had a nose for minerals. Yes, America has treated me well. He'd wanted to prove himself as a man, and he had. The Northcote name meant nothing to him now. He'd abandoned it as soon as he ran away, nor did the lack of his family's acceptance. Faced with being illegitimate, he'd proven his legitimacy many times over. Ashbury Castle had no hold, and his home village of Brightshire was just a distant memory. And that's how I like it. For the past year, he'd called Santa Fe home. It was the longest he'd stayed anywhere. Soon he knew the urge to pack up and move on would be upon him, just like always. As a matter of fact, he was planning to speak with a rancher about a new possibility that very night at supper. If the draw was strong enough, he'd be headed for a town in Colorado called Eden. As he placed the leather bag that held his father's picture back into the trunk for another year, he thought of his mother, his real mother, and wondered what kind of person she must have been. He hadn't known her because he'd been too young when she'd died, but from his uncle he'd learned she'd been kind-hearted and generous, a woman not impressed with riches, but with loyalty and love. A smile played around his lips. Sobered, he closed the lid. It was time he headed to the saloon to scare up a game of poker. He needed something to pass the hours before his meeting tonight. Eden, Colorado, he thought again. Settling in one place sounded nice. If he found the right woman, would he be able to overcome his rambling ways? Or would that burning need to keep moving ignite once more? Chapter 2.
Santa Fe. Why, the city is no more than a prairie dog town.
Riding in the unmerciful Five Sisters Ranch buckboard, Emma Brinkman, repulsed by the billowing dust, pressed her handkerchief to her nose and narrowed her eyes. Warm, early morning sunshine produced a trickle of sweat between her breasts. Men called out to each other as their wagons passed at a quick trot.
What's the hurry so early in the morn?
She placed a comforting arm around Brenda's small shoulders, drawing the child closer. She was somewhere between 4 and 5 years old, and on her way to be adopted into a new home. The child had lived in Santa Fe before she was sent to Eden's orphanage, in hopes of finding a family there. But that had been almost a year ago. No one dreamed she'd have to make the long journey back.
Is she frightened? Confused?
She was usually quiet, so telling was difficult. Belle turned from the front seat. Her older sister's thick blonde hair was plaited down her back, and a wide grin pulled at her lips.
Isn't this exciting, Emma? I'm so glad you came along.
She glanced at Brenda and winked.
You too, Brenda Bluebird,
she said, using their sister Lavinia's affectionate nickname for the child.
It's difficult to comprehend that only a year ago this used to be a sleepy little place reached only by mule team traders.
She waved her hand around, totally oblivious to Emma and Brenda's discomfort.
This is what'll happen if Eden ever gets a train. Imagine that.
At the moment, Emma didn't want to imagine that. Horses, wagons, and cattle, all busily going somewhere, churned up the dust of the dry street and made breathing difficult. Her best dress, the one she'd saved especially for today's arrival, would be ruined. Frustrated, she batted away a clod of dirt from her sleeve.